Hello and welcome back to another video in my Saab 95 Aero. Now this video is going to touch on a couple of the negative things about this car which I didn't talk about in my last video. So if you haven't watched my previous video, I recommend you watch it now as I sort of talk about the positives and why I bought this car. Just a quick reminder for those who didn't watch that video, this car cost me £897. It has 246,000 miles on it and I love it. But there are some things wrong with it, and before we get into that, there is just one thing I want to talk to you about, and if you've seen the title of this video, you might guess what it is. I was doing a bit of research, just looking on the internet before sort of planning this video, and I figured out something, and I think what I figured out is quite cool. This car, I believe, is the cheapest car you can buy that can do over 150 miles an hour. I mean, that's just a really cool title to have. This car in particular, thanks to its 2.3 litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, producing 250 brake horsepower, can do 152 miles an hour for less than £900. If you have the saloon version, which weighs 220 kilos less than this, you can do 155 miles an hour. And the prices are about the same. You can pick those up for around £1,000. So forget your big old Mercs, forget your old Audis and forget your BMWs. Any of those at this budget are knackered, and the majority of them can do 140-ish. If you want a big old fast car, what you need is a Saab 95 Aero. Over 150 miles an hour for less than £1,000. That's amazing, and it's just another reason why I love this car. But like I said, this video is about the negatives. So what's the first one of those? Well, it's kind of related to that weight I just spoke about. As I said, this car weighs 220 kilos more than the saloon, which brings the total up, I think, to 1.7 tons. That's a lot of weight, especially in a car from sort of 2005 when stuff was still not massively, well, these days cars are really obese, aren't they? But 2005, 1.7 tons, that is a lot of weight. And this car does okay at disguising it. As I say, the handling's okay. And the performance, as I'm hoping you'll be able to tell from some speedo clips I recorded, I love it, it's quick. However, that weight I can't shake the feeling that this car feels a little bit less pokey than perhaps the saloon version does. And that's not surprising, as 220 kilos is the difference, which is about 3 average adults, I think. So this car does carry that extra weight around all the time. And there's a third gear pull. It's still not a slow car. It's just when you go full throttle, it does feel a little bit, not strained, it just doesn't feel quite as perhaps potent as you imagine it might. But that's a minor thing. So what else is there that's not quite good about this car? Well, with all that weight and with all the performance on offer, this car isn't particularly good on fuel, as you can possibly imagine. Stop-start traffic has a terrible effect on the fuel economy. So my average is 26.6 miles per gallon in this, and I think that's a decent number, to be fair. I don't drive this lightly, but there is a caveat. I do drive this mostly, I don't really drive in traffic, so 26.6 is kind of achieved on roads like this or dual carriageways. It's something I'm going to have to live with. I don't mind it because I don't use my car for work, but I'm sure some people will find that a bit of an issue. Now, there's one more issue to do with this car, which I'm going to explain to you whilst I'm driving it, and that is just the size of the thing. Now, this is a big car. As I say, it's 1.7 tons, and it's a big car. On the road, it's okay, but parking it can be difficult. Again, you might not be surprised. Funnily enough, I do think the saloon is harder to park than the estate, because at least with this, I can, oh, nice corner. I'm not driven down here since my Clio, so this is going to be fun in this. That's all right. You see, it does all right, doesn't it? Steering rack's just a bit slow. What was I saying? Yeah, the saloon I think would be more difficult to park than this, because I know where the back of this is, as it's where the glass is. Perhaps a slight surprise is this car doesn't have parking sensors. I think doing my research, I've also discovered this is probably one of the lowest spec 95 Aeros you could buy. But anyway. Parallel parking, you sort of have to get used to it. I don't have parking sensors. I do have a tow bar though, which is kind of a parking sensor. And one thing I have discovered is that when you go to Asda, or my local Asda at least, this car doesn't fit in the bays. The front sticks out slightly, and so does the back. Not catastrophic, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Now for the rest of the negatives, I think I'm going to pull over and, well, not pull over, I'm going to stop, get out, get the camera out and talk you through some of those. So pulling you over to talk about the negatives of this car might be a little bit dramatic because it's not actually that bad. There's a couple of bits, so I'll just run through them now. So there's been two things I've had to repair since buying it about a month ago. So the back tyres were pretty much on the limit, so I've had to get some new ones of those. Luckily, I think the 225 section tyres are quite common on newer stuff, so I managed to get two of those, brand new, for £85. Obviously they're not Pirellis, but you know, I don't really mind. So I was happy with that. Now the brakes and the handbrake needed sorted on the back. These discs were in quite bad condition, to be honest. So that was a slightly more expensive fix. That was £320, but you know, now works and it's fine. One interesting thing about this is there is a disc and then there is also a drum brake on the back wheels. The drum is used for the handbrake. Over-engineered, you know. In the last video I said I like this car because it's over-engineered and well built. That's another example of that. Before we move up the car, there are a couple of dings and not on it. This scratch is possibly the worst bit, but it's an old car, I'm not bothered really. As we come up to the front, this sort of lens thing on the indicator, just the clear plastic bit, decided to fly off on the A52. I can only assume because this car is so rapid. The suspension on that side is knocking slightly. I think that's possibly going to need doing at the MOT. Hopefully it's not going to be too expensive. My last Saab had a similar issue. I don't think it was too bad. Another thing I think is going to need looking at the MOT are the xenons, the auto levelling function. There's an error with that at some point in the system. Hopefully that's not going to be too much of a nightmare to sort out. That's it really, I think. I think the exhaust could possibly do with being one of the hangers needs tightening or something. Again, not massively catastrophic. And then on the inside, what have we got? So the bolster on the other side, so the bolstery bit that's closest to the door on that side doesn't quite sit right. Who's really bothered? I sit there, so I'm not worried about that. And there's a bit of trim in the boot that sits along the bottom of the window that needs to be, it doesn't sit right again, but does it matter? This car costs £900. Yeah, I'm not bothered about any of these issues really. Hopefully it'll get through this MOT and then I'll just use it until something catastrophic goes wrong. Yeah, 900 quid, 150 mile an hour car. What more could you ask for? I've been Blee, thank you for watching and please subscribe.